Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have an important energy update, but first, Pennsylvania's 2022 U.S. Senate race. It's going to be a hot one. Back in a moment.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, joining me to take up a bunch of important subjects. One is Marc Levy with the Associated Press and Angela Couloumbis. She's with Spotlight PA and, of course, the Philadelphia Inquirer. Welcome. All right, well, let's start with this. For the first time in something like 40 years, Pennsylvania has an open governor's race and an open U.S. Senate race. No incumbent. And the Senate races looks like it's attracting more, Republicans and more Democrats than the gubernatorial contest. And we're going to, by the way, we're going to cover both on this program extensively. And this week, the past week, we had a real estate magnate from Philadelphia named Jeff Bartos enter the race. He ran for lieutenant governor, in 2018 and lost. And there's not a lot of people in any of these races yet, but boy, we could end up, Mark, seeing 10 people in the Republican primary, 10 people in the Democratic primary. Take it.
Yeah, so not only is there a competition to win the nomination, but there's a competition to get in early to sort of consolidate, support and money and donors. But Jeff Bartos, initially in 2017, wanted to run for U.S. Senate. When Lou Barletta, the U.S. representative, got in the race with Trump's backing, he switched horses to become the lieutenant governor nominee. And of course, he lost along with Scott Wagner. But he's well known in fundraising circles for Republicans. He's made a lot of money in real estate. He's from Montgomery County. And he's already in. And so to the extent that he's traveled around the state, that he's dealt with county parties, he was the state party chair, finance chair for a brief spell. He's known inside the party, and he's got enough money to write himself a big campaign check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, but really, you've started seeing an influx of candidates on the Democratic side.
Right.
Obviously, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman has announced. You have a state rep from Philadelphia, Malcolm Kenyatta, who's also announced. But you also have several others making noises about wanting to enter the race, including another state senator from Philadelphia, Sharif Street. There's talk about a couple of state reps from the Philly area, and also potentially some congressmen and women from the Philly area. So it could be a fairly crowded Democratic primary in that race.
And some of the national outlets that rate both the governor's race and the Senate race in Pennsylvania as a toss-up.
Yeah, you absolutely have to, especially in a general election cycle when the wind is supposed to be at the backs of Republicans because we have a Democratic president. Traditionally, as you know, the party that's out of power typically picks up seats in Congress, maybe even gubernatorial offices. Yeah.
So do you think it's going to matter regionally? We're in many ways now, we're a regional state with the Southeast, Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, and Delaware counties. You got Philadelphia. Right. And what we end up with here is a situation, and then you've got the rural and small town Pennsylvania out in the Southwest and up in the Northeast.
Well, look, I think if you're a Democrat, you take heart from the fact that President Biden won fairly decisively in Pennsylvania, but the down-ballot races were a bit of a wake-up call for Democrats this past election cycle because Republicans took control of, statewide offices, the row offices, and it's a bit of a concern for them. However, having said that, the collar counties around Philadelphia have been trending Democratic, and that has traditionally been a political powerhouse.
All right, let's shift to I think it's $1.9 trillion the last time we checked, and it's likely, as we chat, the House is considering it. It's likely to pass, and there'll be a large amount, billions, into Pennsylvania. I want to talk about that, but let's run to a commercial break first, and then we'll come back and talk about federal money to Pennsylvania.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, I'm talking with reporters Marc Levy and Angela Couloumbis. All right, let's get to it. Let's turn, Angela, federal monies to Pennsylvania, billions out of the $1.9 trillion.
Right.
Where's it all going to go?
Well, that's a great question. Right now, what we know for certain is that Pennsylvania is slated to get a good $13 billion out of this, which about $7.5 will go to state government, and the rest will go to local governments. I think there's still a lot of questions surrounding how that money is going to be distributed exactly and whether any of it can be used to cover partially or wholly the deficit, the projected $2.5 billion deficit in this year's or in this coming year's budget.
Right. I'll tell you, you've got to, when you think about this, there's also these individual stipends. I'll call them stipends, that are going to go to people depending on if they're single, their personal income, if they're married, and they looks like they've lowered that a bit, but that's another pretty significant issue.
Bob Casey's office, the U.S. Senator, estimates that means $15 billion coming to Pennsylvania alone. So households earning up to $150,000, married couples will get the full amount. But yeah, I mean, it's a big amount of money. Plus the money going to governments that Angela mentioned. Governments can use this as grants to individuals, to businesses, to nonprofits, to hard-hit elements of society. So it doesn't all have to go into government budgets. It can go out to the community at large.
All right, one last topic. I started with her. I'll go back to you. Complaints about vaccine distribution.
Yeah.
Boy, I hear them all the time, and you're the professionals here. You cover this.
Every day there's a new complaint, and what we're seeing now from counties is them questioning the amount that they've gotten in the distribution from the state. So vaccines come to Pennsylvania in various different ways. Some is direct to pharmacies or Philadelphia from the federal government. A lot of it comes through the state health department. And there are a number of counties, particularly in southeastern Pennsylvania around Philadelphia, questioning why aren't we getting the amount that corresponds to our, the proportionate level of our population. You have other counties questioning that amount. Yeah. And the Department of Health is trying to respond to that, but making the point that there is a pretty even level of vaccination rate across the counties across Pennsylvania. But there are factors that will skew the amount, inevitably skew the amount that counties get.
Yeah, and then the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been earmarked by Governor Wolf, you correct me if I'm wrong, to go to teachers, and we talked about that last week on the program, and that's pretty important to get schools back to normal, right?
Absolutely, and I think this month in particular is being dedicated to trying to vaccinate as many school teachers and related personnel and child care workers as possible, with the hope that many of these schools can return to some version of full or partial in-person learning by mid-April.
Normality, maybe?
Mm-hmm. We'll see.
Something like, yeah, I'll tell you, the law enforcement officials have raised concerns as well about the distribution, given what they do and the number of law enforcement officials that have come down with a problem.
So when it became clear that Pennsylvania was going to get about 120,000 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and the governor set it aside for teachers, child care personnel, you had the state troopers union and the corrections officers union say, well, what about us? And one of the points they made is that there are outbreaks going on in state prisons as we speak. So there are a number of law enforcement personnel who are on the front lines every day dealing with a lot of different people in a lot of different situations, wondering when their turn will be.
And it looks like bars and restaurants and salons look like they're opening more. Governor Wolf has, increased the percentages for these indoor and outdoor events. So it looks like we're moving towards a pretty dedicated reopening. Yes or no to that?
I mean, there hasn't been a firm commitment as to when, bars and restaurants in particular can start really kind of opening up to the levels that they were pre-pandemic. And I think that there is some caution at the national level because there is some plateauing occurring in the number of cases, new cases per day. And as we know, the Governor Wolf has taken a very cautious approach towards reopening, which has become a big political football between him and Republicans who control the legislature.
The restaurant and bar industry here in Pennsylvania has said to me that they've been told by the Wolf administration not to expect any of their restrictions to lift, at least in March.
In March, but it depends, I presume, on the percentage of people who get vaccinated, correct? I mean, that's the significant element.
Yeah, I think the Wolf administration is closely watching, how many people are getting vaccinated and what happens with infection rates right now and hospitalization rates.
Right. Look, I want to thank you for coming on and giving us this update. All right, when we return, an important energy update, and we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Joining me now is Terry Fitzpatrick. He's the president and CEO of the Energy Association of Pennsylvania and a frequent guest on the program, and we want to talk about all sorts of energy, how do I put this, situations. That works right now, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, situations, catastrophes, another term we could use.
Yeah, that's true. All right, well, let's talk about, first of all, let's go to the Texas blackout. I mean, imagine the situations where you have people who, are on ventilators and other very life-saving devices, and all of a sudden the freaking power goes out.
Terrible situation. Millions of people without power, without heat, without water for days at a time. In the utility business, that definitely qualifies as a catastrophe. Now things like people on ventilators, hopefully if they're in hospitals have backup generators to try to take care of those kind of emergencies. But there's no question that what happened there caused tremendous hardship.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, when you think about energy, and where does Texas draw most of its energy sources from?
Texas takes care of itself.
That's right.
To a large extent. Their electricity system, they've intentionally designed it not to have minimal transmission contacts with other states. And the reason they did that was because they want to control their own destiny, and they can avoid federal jurisdiction over the power system by doing that. So they're kind of an island. They're a bit unique in that respect. But Texas, of course, has an abundance of energy resources. Oh. In fact, Texas and Pennsylvania have some things in common. They're a big energy producer. They're the top natural gas producer. Pennsylvania now is the number 2 gas producer. They have a lot of electric generation to meet their own needs. Pennsylvania has a lot of electric generation. In fact, it's one of the top exporting states in those terms. Yeah,
and natural gas here has been, it's fairly controversial. I think you would admit to that. Now, with a lot of environmentalists say it must end, and even now President Biden, when he campaigned in the state, made a trip to Allegheny County where he said he supports fracking. I don't know if he still supports it, but And Governor Wolf, because of the significance of it, particularly out in southwestern PA and somewhat up in the northern part of our state, has been a big supporter. He wants a tax hit. He wants another tax for
Yes.
it. But it's a pretty significant economic asset for the state, yes or no?
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. But you're also right that it's controversial in some circles. I think folks that are concerned about climate, there is some thinking by some folks that we need to do away with all fossil fuels. I think that's kind of at the far end of the spectrum. Other people realize that gas has actually caused us to reduce our emissions because the switch from coal to gas has meant a cleaner environment because gas, when it's burned, only emits about half of the carbon that coal does.
Let's go to another subject, variable rate plans. We're talking here about payment plans by consumers for their energy, correct?
Correct.
Well, what should the folks out there know about rates and variables and what to look for when they're purchasing energy?
Well, if customers are going to shop for electricity, I would advise them, be a careful consumer and pay attention to the details. Because, let me give you an example. I received a solicitation from a supplier recently, and it said, we'll offer you 25% off of the PPL price to compare for a 3-month period. And after that, it would switch to a variable rate. Now, my comment on that to anybody is you have to know yourself. If you are going to take that low rate for 3 months and then switch to something else, then that might be something you want to do. But if you don't want to be bothered with that and you're going to ignore it and then get on to a variable rate, I really think you ought to think twice about that. Because as we saw in Texas, there's a lesson learned. Most of the time you'll save money doing that, but you do face the possibility of an electric bill that runs into thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And there aren't very many people that can handle that kind of surprise, unpleasant surprise.
It's not a good analogy, but sort of like the term life insurance versus whole life insurance, when the rates for term can go up if you're not careful.
Right.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about important lessons to be learned, and Terry Fitzpatrick will help us out on that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
Welcome back. As you know, we're talking about energy, which is obviously very important. We're heading into spring and then summer, and then we have another situation with energy, correct?
Well, yes, in the summer, the shoulder months are the spring and the fall, where usage is lower, both electricity and natural gas. But particularly in the summer, electricity usage can go up due to air conditioning.
Yeah. All right. What are the big lessons that we can learn? I think you obviously talked a little bit about them when you've been on the variable rate plans, but what are the big lessons? Yeah,
from the Texas situation, I think it's just a general reminder of the importance of utility services and how we really have to expect the unexpected. Weather's getting more unpredictable, and extreme, there's no question about it. So utilities have to make that change, and we are making that change in terms of the investments that we make to winterize the system. And that was the big problem in Texas. They had not done adequate things to winterize their power plants. They didn't count on weather getting as cold as it was for as long as it was, and too many of those plants go down. They had a similar situation back in 2011. It appears they did not respond to that as vigorously as they should have. Yeah. When Governor Thornburg passed away, unfortunately, he was a great governor, it reminded everyone, all of us who followed his career, about how he handled the 3 Mile Island incident, which he got superb ratings for handling it. And where does nuclear power fit into the whole energy situation? Well, that's a matter of some debate. Once again, even among environmentalists, there are some who support nuclear power because they realize that we need that if we're going to reduce carbon emissions. But there are other environmentalists who are completely against nuclear power and think that we can do everything with renewables. I tend to think that nuclear power is very important because it's capable of generating power 24/7, 365, which intermittent renewables aren't. So I think it's going to be an important part of the mix.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting because you don't see much movement on it in the legislature or, out of the executive branch at all. I thought when Governor Thornburgh passed away that might renew interest in nuclear power, as you point out. And then I'm neutral on this. I don't get involved with stating my positions. That's not what the host should do. But I thought that it would bring back another debate in the state about nuclear power. That's all. Just his death, and much of what was written about him had to do with his very, very important and I'll say brilliant handling of 3 Mile Island.
Right. Well, there was a debate a couple of years ago about whether the nuclear industry should receive some special support. And I think that was largely because TMI was threatening to close. Now, of course, we're past that. TMI has closed. I would point out, though, the regional greenhouse gas initiative that the governor has proposed and is moving forward on, which would put limits on carbon emissions from power plants, would end up helping the nuclear industry because they don't have carbon emissions. It would help them in the market. I think maybe that's where the nuclear industry is focusing their attention now.
Yeah. I thought natural gas, the people who support it say that it's better than using coal. Take that.
Yes, it emits about half of the carbon dioxide that coal does. So the switch to natural gas has actually helped lower emissions in Pennsylvania and in the United States. Now, environmentalists, some will tell you that's not enough. It still emits carbon dioxide, and we need to take steps to deal with that.
I guess one of the big concerns with natural gas have to do with the pipelines and the fact that they can leak and create environmental problems that way.
Yeah, that's correct. And of course, there's the ongoing debate about fracking, about whether it's safe or not.
Okay, one last question. We're almost out of time. Do you think that there's anything going to happen with Governor Wolf's proposal for a severance tax on natural gas? It hasn't happened yet.
History would tell you that it faces an uphill climb. And I think for all the reasons that it's failed in the past, I think it still faces an uphill climb.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think the legislature is going to do anything with it. Hey, as always, thanks for coming on. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.